I am Jonelle Sills and I am a soprano. When you're trying to be an international opera singer or even national, you're moving from place to place and you're meeting new friends who become your family in a month, and then you're gone on to the next. So singers are able to generally make connections quite quickly and build bonds quickly, but then poof, you're on to the next in a month. So it can be hard. How did I start with opera? So I kind of like stumbled into it in a sense. I guess my mom was my first experience of like operatic kind of vibrant singing. So I went to York, and exactly that's where I needed to be because I still didn't have very many skills, but it was like York is like so far in Toronto. It's like kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it's perfect because like I wasn't surrounded by a lot of like competition or comparison. I was allowed to have my journey and fail. To wrap your head around learning a 300-page opera for me is always a little daunting, and I always feel that I have some mental like barriers that I have to work through every time I learn a new opera, because I'm always like, oh my gosh, how do I do this again? But I know that that's like a nervous response. So I've had to like learn how to venture into like maybe the darker parts of my emotions so that I can manage and have a sustainable career. It's very rigorous. I feel that it can be compared to like how an athlete trains for the Olympics. And like every opera is like almost like the Olympics, it feels like. There's a lot of work. The audience gets to see 2 hours of an opera show, and a singer could be working for years to do that 2-hour opera.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
So it is like you have to play a game of like balancing your nervous system, because it's like high pressure, but you can't put so much pressure on yourself where you can't breathe. When I was in school at the Royal Conservatory, and I was doing my very first opera, and I think I remember that was the first time I had an anxiety attack, and my dad was taking me to somewhere, and it was a very like small problem with an easy solution, but there was a problem, and I kind of like felt like I kind of blacked out and I couldn't find a solution. And I just remember being very hard to breathe, and I just like wanted to cry because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this thing how I thought I was gonna plan out, like that's the end. And then like in 2022, I like was so burnt out and I was so tired, and like that was like a really hard time because I felt so tired, and I felt like every night I went to sleep, I like didn't want to wake up because I just like wanted to sleep. I was just so tired. I'm sorry I'm crying, but yeah, so obviously it still affects me, but I remember that time, and like that was the hardest time of my life because I was so sad, and I'm like, my usual disposition is like happy and like joyful, and I just like, that's just like my automatic, so I didn't know how to be anything else. But I remember every time I went to bed, I was like, I just don't want to wake up, I just like want to sleep, and I'm so tired. Sorry. So in that time I was like, okay, well obviously I can't keep going on like this. So I've been challenging myself to be more open with my friends and community and like people that are close to me, to tell them like, oh, like I'm actually like struggling, or even my mom will ask like, oh, like how you doing? You know, and I'm like, oh, good. She's like, no, like how you really doing? I feel there is definitely somewhat of a stigma to like kind of the behind the scenes and like the darker parts of being an artist overall. I feel like hopefully there are more spaces for people to talk about it, but I can understand why maybe people wouldn't want to broadcast that on social media, because it is quite vulnerable. Like the power or the importance of having a sound mind as an artist, especially because I've heard singers who are 20 times better than me, but because they couldn't sleep or they like missed their family, they stopped singing. I'm like, wow. If in my mind, I always thought if I sang like you, I'd be so happy and I'd feel so perfect. But I'm like, they had like kind of like a perfect voice, but they decided to stop because their mental health wasn't correct. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are probably struggling mentally, and I think it's okay because it's really hard. And most people don't realize how hard it is because we're on stage and we're like gliding, wearing gowns and smiling. But usually there's a lot of like tears that have gone before you're on stage. Yes, we definitely need to talk about mental health more, and I think people are talking about it more. Or creating spaces. I think like between colleagues we can like be more transparent. But yeah, hopefully we can talk about it more.